Greetings. This is General G here. And today, well, we are going to be tackling one of the last expanded universe books ever released by Lucasfilm before they shut down, well, more like they decanonized the entirety of the expanded universe and have given us just re-releases and one comic and an MMO, and that's it for new content. So yeah, it's Maul Lockdown. So we're tackling it, and I got here two people with me. So go on ahead, guys. Introduce yourselves one by one.
The always dependable Captain Henson, the guy who read this book not expecting much and coming out having gotten very little.
And this is the Spider-Fan Maniac. We're reading another Sith-focused book because we're running out of material, I guess.
Sith related, maybe. So, okay. And so, yeah, we're tackling this book. And, well, I guess we should begin with a brief summary of the story. So, the shortest summary I can give you is, well, Darth Sidious dispatches Darth Maul into the prison colony of Cog Hive 7 in order to find a mysterious weapon merchant known as Iram Redik, in order to pretty much buy from him a nuclear device so that Darth Maul can give it to the Bandogora in order for them to use it against one specific individual, important one, that we'll talk about later on. And in the story, Maul has to pretty much fend for himself because, yep, it's a prison colony and he has to do several fights to stay alive. He also has to do some investigations, some discussions, a bit of negotiation, and lots more stuff that a typical that a typical bloodthirsty assassin wouldn't do. So, yeah, he does all of that, and in the way, well, certain stuff happens with the warden having to deal with one representative of the intergalactic banking clan, and then Java wants to get his own piece on Iram Redik's production, and then the Bandogora, of course, shows up because they want their nuclear device, and lots of killing, lots of shooting, and lots of stuff happens. But ultimately, Maul succeeds in giving the nuclear device to the Bandogora, and he survives. And yeah, that's the basic gist of this.
Yeah, I think that summarized it pretty well.
Yeah.
But I will say this. If you want to read a plot summary of this book while reading a full novel at the same time, just read Darth Plagueis. And you got the full story of Maul Lockdown right there.
Lol. So basically, just read Darth Plagueis, and there you go. You got everything from this book.
Okay, sure. Interesting idea to expand that portion of the novel. I think it's completely unnecessary, and you could have spent time, money, and effort on a novel set literally anywhere else on the timeline. I do not understand making a midquel to Darth. It would be like writing Cloak of Deception after Plagueis. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, granted, Cloak of Deception did bring a lot to the table, but that's because it was supposed to expand on the elements of Phantom Menace and even introduce some for Attack of the Clones. So, but of course, if it was after Plague is released, and that book already has, well, all the 6 movies and all the other elements, yeah, why would you need Cloak of Deception?
Like, Maul Lockdown would have made more sense having been written and released before Plagueis. So that way, it would be like all the other books and comics and video games that Plagueis referenced, but because it was written after, it leads to this feeling pointless, because, and we will get into this whole fucking thing, not much of actual importance happens in this fucking book that justifies its existence.
Speaking of that just reminds me of something. Is like, you mentioning that why would you read this rather than Plagueis, and I think that's exactly the point, because this book relied on the popularity of Darth Plagueis. I think that's the entire point, to get itself sold. I mean, it'll have further explanation, but I think Henson, you're asking why would someone read this, when they could read Dark Plagueis, and my answer is that that's exactly the point. They're relying on the popularity of that book to sell this thing.
I had brought up before we started this podcast that I believe, the reason this book was written, two big reasons. One, Darth Maul was in TCW at the time, so, a little brand synergy there. But also, this was a point in the EU's lifespan. Near the end, Lucasfilm was just putting out standalone filler stuff like Razor's Edge and Honor Among Thieves and what would have been released Heir to the Jedi within the EU. So this book really feels like they wanted to put out content, but content that was minuscule in the grand scheme of things. Nothing that really disrupted or brought something big to the table, which is unfortunate. There are interesting things in here. I think the prison itself is a really cool and interesting setting, and it would have been great to have it pop up more. Of course, it gets destroyed at the end, but, see maybe short stories released with prisoners in the prison. But no, that, we weren't going to get that.
Yeah, so yeah, this book, reading it, there were parts that were entertaining. Definitely, the more gory parts were the ones that definitely make me feel like, okay, this is very interesting. Not something I usually see in Star Wars, and yeah, that's basically the other reason, the other claim to fame of this book, alongside Death Troopers and I guess Red Harvest, that is one of the few mature-rated Star Wars pieces of Star Wars media that exist. Because there's hardly any of those. Republic Commando got a teen rating. Could have gotten mature if it went a bit farther, but it didn't. So
I think the big thing here is just how violent and bloody it is. Because I haven't read Joe's other Star Wars books or non-Star Wars books, but he does describe the graphic stuff really well. So I will give the book props for that.
No, Troy Denning does that good a lot, but that's not a story.
Yeah, Troy Denning. But Troy Denning never goes full mature rated like it does here, and in Death Troopers. Death Troopers especially. That shit was, oh boy, that actually gave me the chills when reading that.
And before someone goes on, I'll say, I will call this version of Maul Sherlock Mauls, because this Maul needlessly feels like a detective to a certain extent due to how this book is structured.
Wow,
seriously.
That is something I would like to bring up. Maul's characterization here. Now, I've read Wrath of Darth Maul some time ago, and my main issue with that book was that it tried really, really hard to have Maul feel like TCW Maul rather than Phantom Menace Maul. He does shit, and we should definitely make a video on that fucking book at some point. But Maul does things in that book that he would never have done in any other story.
Pre-TCW.
So, yes. So I can give this book credit for having Maul feel more in line with his Phantom Menace portrayal, or I guess I should say his pre-TCW portrayal. Now, my main issue with Maul in this book is the premise itself. Now, based on my understanding of Sidious, who knows, I could be wrong, but I do not see for a fucking second Darth Sidious sending Maul on this kind of mission. If you go back to Shadowhunter, go back to the 4-issue miniseries, even to stuff like the Darth Maul's Journal, and also the Star Wars Episode 1 Ventures, when Maul is sent on a mission, it is for a very particular purpose: to hunt down a target. that doesn't require a lot in the way of espionage, critical thinking, detective work. Why the fuck would Sidious send Maul on this kind of mission when that isn't his designed purpose?
And that's the noticeable thing because, like, in this, some would notice that Maul talks a lot. And I mean a lot because he's the main character and all, but you see, the issue begins with putting Maul in this type of situation because, like, he's supposed to be recognized as the strong and silent type. But the book constantly demands him to seek for information, communication, and cooperation with other people. All qualities which Maul, should not have, if we're being honest, because he was raised by Sith Lord in freaking Mustafar, so he'd be antisocial as hell. And he is, seriously.
Not to mention, and this is the big thing too, I think a perfect way to describe Maul as a character is a dog. He is Sidious's dog. He gets pointed in the right direction, and he fucking goes there and does what he's supposed to. And what he's supposed to do is usually fairly simple. Oh, kill the leaders of Black Sun. Shit like that. Here, though, he has to sneak into this prison and not only figure out the identity of this arms dealer, but he has to. Oh, God.
Yeah, okay. He also has to somehow find the crate that's necessary. He also somehow has to make a deal with the Bandogora. So, like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, in a lot of ways, this plan could have failed miserably. Like, the fact that it even succeeded at all. Like, Sidious is a smart guy, but I feel like he left way too much to chance on this one.
There's also 2 points I would want to say. This is very strictly a personal mission for Sidious, because if you see the other missions regarding Maul, everywhere he's set, he's either going to kill a big criminal organization, which is a threat to, the Sith plan, or, destabilize a corporation by killing people, or, killing that bitch Hat Monchar. Wasn't that his name, right?
Yes, he was supposed to kill Half Monchar, which then gave the holocron to Lord Pavan, so both were pretty much just targets for Maul.
So every type of mission he was sent was either destabilizing the galaxy or, killing anyone who knows about the Sith plan. But this mission, it kind of seems petty for Sidious, because this mission does not have anything to do with the Sith plan if you think about it. It is purely for Sidious so that he wants to kill that individual. That individual, right? Not right now, but,
There's also the fact that, as far as anyone is aware, the guy that Maul is supposed to find, Radiq, he's someone who may not even exist. Like, his existence is up in the air. You're leaving so much to chance on this one. And, why would why would Sidious risk? Like, Maul, sure, at the end of the day, he was expendable. But, he served a very particular purpose that Sidious used to his advantage. Why the fuck would you risk losing this really valuable asset on this kind of fucking mission?
Oh, and another thing I have to point out is relevant to this point is the book mentions that Sidious knows that Maul was upset for not being included in the events of Cloak of Deception. Now, if you think about it, that sentence alone contradicts this book's themes, because now I understand why Maul was not included in Cloak of Deception, because Maul was just an assassin. He does not have the critical thinking capabilities to facilitate, communications, nor has any political skills. It makes sense why Maul was not in Cloak of Deception. And now reading this book, it doesn't make any sense, because why wasn't he there in the book? Why did you bring that up?
May I also ask why would Maul even be disappointed that Sidious did not send him on the Radio Summit operation, happening cloak deception? Like, does Maul even care if Sidious sends him to this and not this? Like, does he really care, at least prior to CW? Like, wouldn't he just do whatever Sidious commands him to do and that's it? Like,
I mean, he will be is disappointed he did not participate in the Great Crusade or whatever.
even though he was pretty much part of it. Like,
But it makes sense why Maul wasn't in Cloak of Deception now, thinking about it, because he's not a political guy. He doesn't know how to do communications. He's just an assassin. That's why he wasn't in that book. It all makes sense now.
yeah.
Why this book was written in a post TCW world? Like, this characterization of Maul fits with TCW. It does not fit pre-TCW, because this was not the purpose of his character.
Well, let me remind you that the characterization is TCW, but yeah, it doesn't really. By the way, it doesn't really have the nonsensical Dr. Miriam or any of that. It doesn't, right? I'm pretty sure of it.
No, because
No, there was no reference to the Dathomirian stuff.
none, because this book not only takes place before the Phantom Menace and TCW, but also because there really was no need to reference Maul's backstory here.
It being set pre-episode 1 doesn't mean anything, because Wrath of Darth Maul referenced it quite a bit, and even had Mother Talzin show up.
Oh,
What I mean is they're not overt, TCW references, but the characterization is still there.
Like, the whole thing with Sidious sending Maul for this particular mission only makes sense if you've watched TCW. Because Maul being some kind of smart, intellectual, criminal mastermind who's able to, like, formulate this whole fucking plan that's, like, larger than himself, that's a TCW thing.
it is.
And let me also remind you, Maul in this book goes under the name Juggernaut. And you guys might not know this, but Juggernaut is actually a reference to the Juggernaut points. What Juggernaut points means is it's a Trandoshan goddess or Trandoshan religion. So basically what this means is when a Trandoshan goes around, capturing Wookiees or getting, targets, they believe they gain more Juggernaut points. So when they die, they're gonna go into Trandoshan version of heaven or something. Now you may think this is not really relevant until you realize this book does not have a single Trandoshan, criminal Maul interacts with.
No.
I'm pretty sure this in a prison there's gonna be at least one Trandoshan in there, and one Trandoshan is gonna notice that Maul is going around using a fake name.
Yeah.
There's no single Trandoshan.
Yeah, the only Trandoshan that showed up came with freaking Java's freaking troops. Like, that was it.
You mean to tell me a species who goes around enslaving people are not there in the prison?
I guess they just gave him that name because it sounded cool.
Who came up with
you don't
this?
give a character a name like that without knowing what it is.
Who came up with this?
Joe Schreiber, the author.
I would really like to read interviews with him about this book, like why it was written the way it was.
Not a single Trandoshan inmate or Maul to interact with. Because if there was, I guarantee you that everyone in the prison would know that that is not his real name.
You know, another point with Maul's character that perplexed me was when he's lurking around, like within the interior walls or whatever, he sees a bird. And he's like, oh, go away, bird. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying Maul would kill the bird, but the way he treated the bird felt really off. Not to mention when... crap. What was the name of the kid?
Eogon.
Eogon.
I think the father's name was Artigan.
I was worried, so worried when Maul and Egon first interacted, because I did not want this book to become Maul taking care of a child that I couldn't give less of a shit about. Like, why was that subplot even here? Who gives a shit? I certainly didn't.
And that brings up another problem. I mean, I tried to give a lot of praise to this book, but it gives another problem because Maul has certain protective feelings towards this kid. He pretends that he doesn't care, like any, typical Japanese character who acts all like, I didn't do this for you type of characters. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like Vegeta or Kaiba. But, Maul is like an anti-hero in this book because he clearly saves this kid multiple times even though he doesn't have use for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the end. Then we get to the part where Kamari Vosa shows up. Now, when this happens, my first thought was, oh, okay, we could get a very cool, interesting fight scene out of this. I mean, granted, we know neither of them are going to die, but, seeing these two fight, Maul being a silent, ruthless killer who's just fucking brutal, and Vosa who's just a psychopath, it's like, okay, this could be really neat. The fight only lasts, 3 minutes. It's like, oh, fuck that. And then the worst part is they just start talking. And them talking isn't the issue. It's the fact that they are able to talk so casually.
I'm also thinking, how does Maul know Komari Bosa? I haven't read a single EU book where these two interacted before. Maybe it came from this thing. But, this universe seems really small if you have these two random people who somehow know each other. And not even that, Komari Bosa refers Maul as a Maul. So that would mean that she knows his real name also. How do they know each other? Why are they so calm with each other? Are they friendly towards each other? What is going on? Or am I having more thoughts than the writer himself when he came up with this?
And then when Vosa came into things, Maul says something that I thought was really interesting that I wish was expanded upon more. This idea, Maul gets it in his head that maybe this was, I can't remember if it was either he thought this was the mission the entire time, or at least a part of it, where Maul thinks that Sidious wants him to kill Kamari Vosa. And that got me thinking, yeah, why couldn't that have been what this was? Because we see by the time of Bounty Hunter that, yeah, Sidious wants Kamari Vosa dead. Why not try that a bit earlier? And we can have Maul failing or whatever. So Sidious is like, oh, okay, do this thing now. And it's like, we'll deal with Kamari Vosa later. Or something.
Yeah, it could have been done, especially since this book is in 33 BBY and Bounty Hunter is in 32 BBY.
No, the timeline of this book, the people who came up with this book put it in the wrong timeline. So, Cloak of Deception is 32 BBY, right?
Yeah.
So, and this book, despite what it claims to be 33 BBY, is set after Cloak of Deception. So just ignore what this book claims it to be set in. It's still 32 BBY.
Okay, that explains why in Wikipedia it says that the plot of the novel focuses on Darth Sidious trying to have Maul deliver the nuclear device to the hands of Pandagora, which is supposed to be the same device used in the subsequent attack on, spoilers, on Darth Plagueis on Sojourn in the same novel. However, Lockdown also references the Eriado Trade Summit and the assassination of the Trade Federation Directorate, which took place simultaneously with the attack on Sojourn in Darth Plagueis, meaning the attack should have already taken place before the events of Lockdown. So,
I mean, just think about it. So, this book happens, right? It's all 32 BBY. Cloak of Deception happens at one point, and then this book happens, and then, Phantom Menace happens, and also Bounty Hunter happens, and it's all still 32 BBY. This is literally happening all at the same year, if you think about it.
The fact that, you can be reading Darth Plagueis, have to hit pause, read this book, and it's like, oh, shit isn't lining up. I didn't know I was reading what was the equivalent of a straight to DVD Disney midquel. You see,
Yeah,
it's little things like that where it's like you have the writer, you no doubt had editors, no doubt had people to make sure that, continuity was in check. Or maybe at this point they were like, fuck it, everything's being decanonized. Who gives a shit? Just get it the fuck out of here.
Yeah, especially since this book came out in 2014. The same year that he was canonized.
Like
and
a few months later, and like the decanonization happened like April, right?
Yes, April 25.
So just a few months after the release of this book, it's like, oh, good night, Irene. And so, yeah, I'm sure there was a tiny bit of who gives a shit going on with the creation of this book.
Yeah.
and let's see. Oh yeah, I also have to mention the quote-unquote eye candies or whatever you call it. It's like in the very first beginning of the book, and this book heavily advertised it. Maul, for some reason, is fighting a Yuzan Bong warrior or something, and I was like, okay, sure. I mean, yeah, that's all interesting and all, but so what, right? So what? I saw Yuzan Bong. Am I supposed to clap? Am I supposed to cheer for this?
Okay.
What am I supposed to think about this?
Okay. Now, this could have been a very interesting fight, because keep in mind, the Yuzhan Bong are supposed to not even be a thing in the Star Wars galaxy at this time. They come until way later in the timeline, until the
not really, because in Knights of the Old Republic, Kendra saw Yuzhan Bong, so it could have been.
But the galaxy still doesn't know shit about them. They're still supposed to be like just randomly scouting somewhere in the unknown regions. So the entire galaxy doesn't know about them. They don't even know if they even exist. So they're in extreme rarities until much later they actually show up. So of course Sidious and Thrawn already knew about them, but but aside from that, so just one showing up is anywhere. Yeah, people will not know who he is or what armor he's wearing, what species, nothing. So, and also considering that they are supposed to also be like cut from the Force, that also will make it very fascinating for sensitives. Okay, so one Yushin Bong soldier warrior going up against Darth Maul in a, well, I want to say fist fight, but the Bong did have his staff that is also supposed to be an organic weapon. So, but yeah, so yeah, that is interesting. So it's interesting, regardless of continuity and everything. Yeah, that's an interesting scenario. The problem here is it's done at the exact very beginning of the book. No setup, no build up, nothing. And the battle doesn't last that long. It's like 2 pages at most. And it just ends. Like, that's like the first battle we see Darth Maul doing in this prison. It was like nothing. It was hyped up for nothing. It was just, meh. Yeah, he fights Yushan Bong at the beginning. Yeah, that's it. There was more build-up for that fucking Wampa fight than fucking the Yushan Bong. Like, what the fuck? Fucking Wampa. God damn.
I don't know why, but this reminds me of the fact that we were supposed to get an episode of TCW all about the Yuzhong Vong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the idea of throwing in the Yuzhong Vong this early into things. It's only an interesting one. But in this case, you could have had the opponent be literally anyone and nothing would have changed, so...
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fight scenes overall I thought were well written. I didn't really give a shit about any of them, but, I love me gore, I'm a slasher guy, so them getting as bloody as they did, it's like, man, I wish I could see this in the fucking movies. I know that's never gonna happen, but I would love to see it.
But there's a whole interesting part about how, all these people are somehow interested in this prison, right? Like, Jabba the Hutt has a stake in it, and then the banking clan comes in, and then the whole galactic community is watching these death matches and all that stuff. Now thinking about it, the main character does not necessarily have to be Maul. I mean, you could make an entire book about that.
I just had that thought too. You could remove Maul entirely. Like, remove all the Sith stuff. Remove this being a midquel to Plagueis, and just have it be either. Oh, you could have done an anthology with stories all set in this prison, or you could have keep the idea of the prison being destroyed at the end and just have a different different main character.
Yeah, you could just make a Star Wars remake of a Fight Club. No, not Fight Club. What was that movie about the guy in the jail who had to fight people?
The guy.
Is that Fight Club?
Is it really Fight Club? The one with Brad Pitt?
Now, that wasn't about a prison, though.
Anyway, something about that. Death matches until one guy dies, and it's streamed all over the internet and all that stuff.
You could have thrown in elements of The Great Escape, too. Like, there is an interesting story that could have been told here. Like, every time we do something not involving Maul, like when we focus on the Warden. Oh, yeah, that is another fucking thing here. Like, we find out that the Warden's brother, what the fuck was his name?
Zero or Dakari or whatever the hell he comes himself.
Yeah, the guy who was masquerading as the Twi'lek.
Yeah.
It's like, the book is trying to portray that as some kind of big deal, but then he gets killed off, like, immediately after that reveal, and it just, like, does not matter. Like, at all.
We don't even see the Warden seeing her reaction of her brother dead. Not even that.
Oh, she doesn't know he is dead. Because the whole place was gonna...
She died. She just died. Nothing.
Yeah,
he didn't even need to exist.
But the problem with this real book, now thinking about it, is not... all these things are kind of, minuscule when compared to this thing. I didn't really care whether this was more about TCW Maul or how the plan doesn't make sense. But the whole detective process regarding finding the identity of Iram or Iram Radiq, let's just call him Radiq for not confusing people, doesn't really make sense because the whole plan, plot, Maul goes around looking for this mysterious, weapons dealer who may not even exist, and he goes around constantly, guessing whether is this guy Iram Radiq or is this guy Iram Radiq, and the identity of Iram Radiq is so nonsensical that you cannot have your deductive reasonings will not work. It's essentially, what the fuck? Like, Iram Radiq in the book is revealed to be a chiss. And I was like, wow. First you put a Yuzan Bong, and then you also put a chiss. Bravo, really.
It's like, that's what this whole book was leaning towards. Maul finally finding this guy. And it's like, there didn't need to be any fucking mystery. Like, none at all. As it turns out, Radiq was, well, we don't actually see him until, like, the very fucking end.
If this is a detective novel, it's a terrible one. It's really terrible.
Is there an actual good Star Wars detective novel?
I don't think so.
I haven't read the Disney Thrawn trilogy, so I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, when I first read Maul Lockdown, maybe other things was distracting, but finding out the identity of Iram Radiq, right? That was really interesting because does this guy really exist? Is he among the prisoners? Who is he, right? Those are genuinely interesting questions you could be thinking about. But when you actually figure out who this guy is, you start to wonder, it makes no sense.
It does feel like Joe really wanted to tell a story with this prison, with these side characters, because we get a lot in the way of delving into why the prison is the way it is. Like, we learn later on that, because the warden wanted the prison finished quickly, a lot of corners had to be cut. which of course leads to problems by the end of it. It's like, and of course, we find out that there's a whole system, or like, there's a way these criminals do things, and Radique is a major player here. Your typical prison story stuff. Maul feels very out of place here. Like, you could have easily had either instead of having Maul going undercover, it could have been like a Republic soldier or whatever. Or have like Jabba the Hutt hire somebody to find Radique. Like, that would make way more fucking sense.
And I'm not trying to say the whole mystery thing about Radique was bad, because that is genuinely interesting stuff to keep you hooked in. I'm just saying the reveal of Iram Radique's identity is so nonsensical, it just makes my mind blown. And it's really disappointing if you actually arrive to the conclusion.
Yeah, and speaking of Jabba hiring somebody to find Radique, ironic that you mentioned that, Henson, because that's exactly well, not exactly. Jabba just does indeed hire several people to masquerade as guards for the COG 57 to pretty much go in masquerading as guards to find Ram Radique. So they do want to find him. It's just that instead of making the entire story around them, it's around Maul. Yeah. So.
And the whole, Jabba putting, guards to infiltrate the prison and all that stuff is interesting because, everybody has a stake in this prison, I guess.
Yeah.
And Iram Radique must be this so influential and, so high-profile target that everybody somehow wants to find and get him or something. Magister Higo Damask wants to find him, Jabba the Hutt wants to find him, and even Komari Bosa at one point wants to find him.
Yep, everybody wants a piece of Iram Radique, but...
And in the end, none of it even mattered.
But we got to get into the real reason why this book, in the end, matters. Not. In the grand scheme of things.
Go ahead.
As you know, you would have heard that us mentioning the name Plagueis or Higo Damask. And the reason why Higo Damask is really important in this book is the whole point of this book is to have Maul acquire a nuclear device and send it to the Bandogora so that they would use this weapon to kill Higo Damask. And since this is not really a spoiler, they fail. The nuke does not kill him. So this whole book's plot becomes meaningless. Not that it really needed to exist in the first place, but even the conclusion, or let's just say closure, to Maul's mission, in the grand scheme of things, does not matter.
I had mentioned this before we started this podcast, that this book would have made more sense having been written and released prior to Plagueis. Like with Cloak of Deception, Shadowhunter, pretty much every story referenced by the Plagueis novel. Because, there's also the fact that all of those stories stand well on their own, and they offer enough to justify their existence. But this book, like I said during my introduction, if you want to know the story of this book while at the same time reading a full-blown novel, read Darth Plagueis. This book doesn't give you anything you, need to know. Yeah, there's some interesting things, but overall, it's you can skip it and not miss a fucking thing. Oh yeah, Kamari Vosa and Darth Maul fought once. It didn't fucking mean anything. Didn't lead to anything, but it did happen. Ooh.
It's not even referenced later on in the EU timeline, their fight.
Okay, well, to be fair on that, yeah, I won't give them shit for that due to real-world circumstances, but, overall, it's this book could have been something really interesting if they had just given the main character slot to literally anyone that wasn't Maul.
Or Sif.
Maul was only here to sell the fucking book. That was it.
I mean, yeah, and to think about it, right? So, Plagueis also appears in this book. And, it just reinforces the thing. Is like, it doesn't really seem to question about Sidious's plans a lot. Like, what do you think about Plagueis? Because, Sidious, Plagueis somehow believes that Maul is in the prison to sell the weapon, I guess. That's what he buys. That's the Sidious thing.
Not exactly. Plagueis thought that Sidious sent Maul there to kill
Oh, okay.
Ram.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. Yeah, he never knew that the real purpose for Maul there was to acquire the nuclear devices out to the Band of Gora.
And then there's a weird scene, right? Where Maul is having some meditation and has a vision, and he hears the name Plagueis for some weird reasons. And that, of course, goes nowhere because Maul does not know Plagueis exists.
And not to mention, he dies in the next year. Assuming this is Event 33 BUY, which is confusing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that led nowhere.
I mean, there is a short story called Star Wars Endgame where Maul figures out that Palpatine might be working under a man called Hugo Damask. But that's not really relevant in this case.
Yeah, agreed. So, yeah. And I'm gonna ask you guys regarding this book. This is mostly tied to the last part. So you guys already said that this book feels like it's just filler. It just is just an excuse to tell one portion of Darth Plagueis, novel, the nuclear device subplot. But what about the Bando Gora and Kamari Boza showing up here?
Okay, yeah. Before anyone says it, I will have to say this first. My problem is not the Bando Gora exactly appearing. And Bando Gora, of course, they should appear in Plagueis' book because not Plagueis, Lockdown. Because in Plagueis, it is said clearly that the Bando Gora attacked Plagueis' ship. So I have no issues with the Bando Gora appearing. Now, that is assuming Komari Bosa, the woman herself, not appearing. Because why does she appear? Just because you have the Bando Gora in the book does not mean Komari Bosa should appear. It feels like freaking fan service, if you want to know my opinion about that.
Yes, I too played Star Wars Bounty Hunter.
It reminds you of that meme from Red Letter Media. Saying, I clapped when I saw Star Wars. Whoa, a Yuzan Bong. I clap. Wow.
I know what that is.
A Chiss. Darth Plagueis. Komari Bosa. Yeah, it's all of these things.
Yeah, it's like, it really gets me thinking that, we could have gotten, of course, this would have been released after, but, we were gonna get Sword of the Jedi, and instead we wasted time on books that serve no other purpose other than just to produce content. Oh, God. It's like, what this book could have been? We could have had this book about the Bando Gora breaking into this prison to get to Radique and get the fucking bomb. That should have been what this book was about.
No, I don't really think, the Plagueis book, implies that Sidious was behind the nuclear bomb incident.
It's been so long, I don't remember exactly.
Not that I recall, but it still wouldn't matter much, to be honest, because would still be filler.
Plagueis novel only just says that Palpatine says, "Whoa, Plagueis, I thought you would die, after getting hit by the nuclear bomb, but you somehow survived." So, he does. So maybe that's an indication. Maybe not.
Could be, or it could just be Sidious actually be surprised. So who knows? But at the end of the day, that's just a small, it being revealed that Palpatine did a nuclear device. That could have easily been explained in whatever other form of media. It could have been an essential guide. It could have been anything. It didn't need a full-on novel to explain that. It really didn't. That would be like saying, "Oh, I need an entire book just to explain where the hell I need to get that blue lightsaber that fell off at the end of Luke versus Vader." Oh wait, this is Star Wars. Oops, my mistake. I guess we do need one for that continuity.
I mean, so
You know,
I mean, so
I will say this: the one of the big things in this book is the Xerox. I believe that's how it's pronounced.
Yes.
And everything regarding this creature I thought was really interesting. This creature that was like this culmination of all these minds and was just eating.
Hmm.
you know that reminds me of something. A thought bomb.
Actually, well, I mean, in a way, yeah. But the way they actually grow and incubate and grow, it actually reminded me. This was after I first saw it, read them in the book, and then got to the chapter. It reminded me of one of your favorite franchises, guys, freaking Alien, because apparently these wolf worms, that's another name they're called. Apparently, aside from being parasitic, they apparently are like microscopic eggs inside of rivers of their homeworld, the planet Monsolar, and whoever was dumb enough to pretty much drink that water, they would have those eggs inside them for incubate and grow for many years until eventually they would emerge from the host, and pretty much kill him. So there is one way to get them out using ansatis, not garlic. It was like a folk remedy on that planet, so that you could basically get it out. It will crawl out of your mouth, but yeah, usually if you couldn't do that, you'd pretty much be dead. So. I wonder if Joe Schreiber got some inspiration from Alien for this one. uh, I wonder.
So I didn't know about this, but apparently, before the release of Maul Lockdown, Joe Schreiber released a short story in Star Wars Insider called The
Oh yeah.
Surox Redemption.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Seems to be about the birth of the Xerox we see in the novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Out of all the ways to expand on this story, that's what he chose to do. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but still.
No, it's a story designed to, oh, you find this story interesting? Buy this book. That's a common tactic, used by some of the, Star Wars writers. Even Plagueis did it. They had this story called Tenebrous Way, so that, people read this and, like, oh, I want to know more about Plagueis. Oh, the difference is Plagueis is actually a book you could read hundreds of times, and this thing you read once and forgot about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess another cool thing is that most of the characters die. I mean, I didn't really give a shit about most of them aside from Maul and the Warden.
And
You,
Bosa.
you know,
I
now
mean, she was
seeing
barely
that,
a character in this.
you mentioned Alien, right, General?
Yes.
Alien and then Star Wars and then Prison. Does that remind you of something?
In a way, Alien.
Alien
Yes.
3.
Alien also had a story involving a character being trapped in a prison with an evil or a malicious alien entity, in which most of the characters also died.
Yeah. I guess there is, relevance.
I do believe Joe Schreiber could have gotten inspiration from Alien and Alien 3, considering that his two previous books before Maul Lockdown were Red Harvest and, of course, Death Troopers, which that's definitely his biggest claim of fame, Death Troopers.
And, Death Trooper is still relevant here because one of the characters appears here, and he later becomes a warden in Death Troopers.
Ah, yes. Yeah, there are several elements here in Maul Lockdown that do show up later on. In particular, the Purge. That's basically the prison barge that later became part of the Empire, and yeah, the person that was in charge of it, Beasley.
Warden Bisley. Yeah, Bisley Claw.
Yep, he pretty much did show up later in Death Troopers. So that is I will admit that is some good continuity between the author's own stories. That's good.
Yeah, the writer remembers his roots.
I mean, let's be real. There are some that don't, or they do, but they just retcon the shit out of it. They Filoni. So I'll give him credit on that. But indeed,
Going back to Kamari Vosa for a second, it fucking shocks me, or maybe not shocks me, but like her only major appearances in like the entire expanded universe are flashbacks and open seasons, the main villain and bounty hunter, and I guess I
She
would
does.
call her a primary character here, and like that's it. Like, yeah, sure, she's mentioned in other things,
Yeah.
but in terms of like actual appearances, that's it.
yeah, it is pretty much it. Yeah.
And like, as the former apprentice to Count Dooku and the leader of this really big influential organization, you would think she would have had way more appearances than that.
Oh,
Yes,
by the way, Komari Bosa's lightsabers are the same as Ventress, so you could basically think every time Ventress appears with her double lightsabers, you could basically consider that as Komari Bosa reference.
I mean, it is, because those lightsabers are the exact same ones given to Benjamin.
Yeah.
So, there you go. Yeah. And
She may be forgotten in name, but her, impact in Star Wars is still remembered.
yeah, indeed. And is there anything else you guys want to discuss in regards to the book?
I mean, I think I've said all I can really say. I think I'm ready for closing thoughts.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Okay, but first, shall we do some EU connections?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, EU connections. Let's get the obvious ones out of the way. Darth Plagueis book, of course. No questions asked with that one. Obviously, Bounty Hunter, because Bandogora, Kamari Bosa, yeah.
And, there's a Republic Commando reference. This is hard to catch, but the, LS-160. This gun is the Gatling gun from Republic Commando.
Yep, the LS-150 is...
One.
Yep. It's the one used by that freaking huge-ass Trandoshan mercenary here.
And I forgot what was that, Bosk short story from Tales of the Bounty Hunters, but, since Maul goes around mentioning, referring himself as Juggernaut, that story will be relevant.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, of course, the Star Wars Insider short story from issue 146. Of course, that would be tied to this, since that's pretty much debuted several elements.
And Yuzan Bong. So,
Of course.
I mean, I would say calling Yuzan Bong a purely a New Jedi Order reference will be a stretch. They do appear a lot. So
They do appear in sources, but New Jedi Order was their debut before they retconned into Crimson Empire, so that would be its first foremost. So yeah, of course, there's some references to the Tron trilogy, not just the cheese showing up, but also Wayland and the Clawbirds being here. So
oh, I remember.
yeah,
There's also a Dead Trooper reference as we talk about Persh and Warden Bisley Claude himself appearing.
Yep. Of course, Death Troopers.
And Cloak of Deception, because Iriadu incident is mentioned.
Yeah, indeed. So that definitely is there. So, here's an interesting one. When Java not.
Oh,
Java,
no.
but-
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No, you're probably talking about this random, Major Domo or whatever Jabba the Hutt soldier from this comic book, right?
That is one of the reference. That is one reference I do have. Yeah. No, I was not talking about Scoopa. Although yes, he is one. He is one that comes from one of the Jabba the Hutt comics. So yeah, but no, that's not what I was talking about. The specific enemy you fight in the Dark Forces video game, the Kell Dragons. They first appeared there, and according to the PC Gamer magazine and some other sources, these dragons were Jabba pretty much kept several of these for himself to pretty much throw freaking prisoners to just getting eaten, slaughtered by the beasts. So it was canon that Jabba did kill dragons, and we see it here in Maul Lockdown, where he carries two kill dragons into the freaking prison colony. Now Jabba was not there personally, but his forces did take two kill dragons. So yeah, that is some good consistency with the Dark Forces game. So yeah,
Oh,
that's good.
wait. I do also think, Homari also mentioning Dooku and the thing she left, why she left. Isn't that a reference to Jango Fett Open Seasons?
Yeah, so is she a reference to Open Seasons? So yeah, definitely.
No.
You know,
And both references to Open Seasons and Bounty Hunter. And those are separate things. And, what was that weapon Alpha 17 used? Western M5, was it?
I believe so.
Yeah, so either the Micro series or in Star Wars Republic, I guess.
Oh, speaking of the micro series, there's actually one thing there's actually one element that series pretty much brought into here, and that's the Noban. Because you remember, there's the Noban hacker in this book, and Noban first appeared in chapter 22 of the Clone Wars 2003, the micro series.
And I think Henson would know this. You remember Treza, the guy who taught Maul, martial arts and how to, use.
Yes.
That guy appears in. I think it was no, it was one of the Darth Maul short stories. Was it Restraint? Yeah, I think it was Restraint.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it could be one of those. And other references. Well, there's obviously plenty from Darth Plagueis. The Galactic Gaming Commission apparently is one of them. It was first mentioned in Darth Plagueis. And yeah, also there are obviously some Phantom Menace references. Like for example, the Bulb Terrine that first appeared in Episode 1 Racer alongside Phantom Menace itself. Yeah, of course, sure. Show up here.
I think Wrath of Darth Maul is mentioned because Maul says that he was raised in Mustafar, so that's a reference, I guess.
Yeah, it would be, because pre-TCW I've never heard Maul being raised on Mustafar, so it will have to be one, yeah. Then a very obscure one, apparently Flimsy Blast, or Flimsy, or like it's apparently a popular media for written word. That was actually first debuted in Jedi Search, can believe it. Yeah, very obscure one, but there it is.
I see.
And then of course the Death Spine Baractyl, the one that Maul had to pretty much kill in order to pretty much get the skull to Coil, the Chadrafan. Yeah, those actually first appeared in Star Wars Galaxies. Yeah.
The MMO is somewhat referenced.
Yes. Yep, the MMO got referenced, so there is that. Of course, because Komari Bosa Bandogora, obviously there's the references to Bounty Hunter, Moon of Bogdan, and so on and so forth. So there is that. The C-95 Headhunters, the precursors to eventually becoming the X-Wings, or at least influencing them. They, of course, first appeared in Han Solo: A Star's End. Yep, that fork with the Han Solo trilogy. So there is that. Then there's the Oscan Blood Eaters. Yeah, those they show up here, and the first appearance, or more like the first ever mention, seems to be Creatures of the Galaxy, which is a supplement for the Star Wars role-playing game by West End Games. So you got those, and yeah, I think that's all the references I can think.
Wait, where was Scarpa, or whatever the hell his name was, from?
Who?
Jabba's minion. One of the major domos he brought in, Lockdown, right?
You talking about Scoopa, or?
Yeah, that guy, I think. Where did he come from?
He comes from Jabba the Hutt, the hunger of Princess Nampi.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has a lot of reference for a late-stage EU book. Yeah, I need to point this out because Razor's Edge and, Honor Amongst Thieves, those books do not really try to have any reference or anything tie in. There are basically stages where they basically gave up. This book at least has the decency to reference EU material, but those books gave up.
Well, I guess there is that, yeah. Indeed. And well, by the way, there is a very random reference from Tales from Java's Palace. Apparently, Ramorian caponata, a food often served with ice fish. That's very small, very obscure. Also first mentioned in Tales of Java's Palace, and first appears in Star Wars Galaxies, as you needed any more references from the MMO. And yeah, that seems to be it as far as any other major references, unless you guys got others.
I don't.
Hanson?
I don't.
Okay, well, then I guess now we go into the conclusion. So, who goes first?
So, overall, this book was well written, but ultimately a pointless endeavor. It has interesting ideas and does have, world building that could have led to some interesting things, but as it stands, you don't need to read this book, and maybe it being standalone would be a plus for some people. But for me personally, this being one of the final EU novels ever is one of the most disheartening things ever. So, yeah, I would recommend if you were to get into the EU, have this be low on your priority list alongside stuff like Razor's Edge and Honor Among Thieves.
And Scoundrels.
Yes. Just read Darth Plagueis. That's all you need. You get a great story, and also none of the events here really matter in the grand scheme of literally anything.
Is that it?
And also, this was better than Wrath of Darth Maul, which, in my opinion, isn't saying much, but at least there's that.
Okay. Doan?
Yeah, I would say this is a pretty good book. We rented about a lot. I rented a lot. But, I mean, I'm just saying it when, certain weird things happen. But I would say read this book under the condition that you read it before Plagueis. Do not read this book after Plagueis, because this book will feel like it's useless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and watch TCW before it. That's a prerequisite. Yeah. So, yeah, under that circumstances, you should, read this book. And, yeah, I had a fun time reading it. Wasn't the worst thing. Yeah, so, yeah, you talk now, General.
Okay. As for me, well, story was entertaining, but there are a few times that I did think that it was dragging along a bit, because just felt like it was for for a simple plot. It was just taking a bit too long. Yeah, the suspense was killing me a bit with Rambradik, but then the review came along and I was like, it's just a cheese. Okay. I know, and the interactions between Maul and Komari Bosa were weird. It didn't really feel like they're actual characters. And obviously with Maul, we know why. TCW. Komari Bosa, definitely not the characterization I expected from a Dark Jedi psychopathic leader of a pretty much dark side cult. So not cool with that. And there were cool EU elements, of course, aside from Darth Plagueis. There were other things. But ultimately, yeah, this is one book that unless you really like Darth Maul and you want more mature rated Star Wars content, like if you like those prerequisites, then yeah, by all means read it. By all means. Yeah, if you like Maul and you want more mature rated content, then yeah, read Maul Lockdown. But if you really don't mind those two things, or even if you like Maul, at least if you like pre-TCW Maul, Yeah, this book won't really do much for you, and if you already read Darth Plagueis, which a lot of people did, yeah, no, there's not much here for you. You really have to be a big fan of Darth Maul, and if you want more mature rated stories, like you really need those two prerequisites because otherwise. There's not really anything here like just as Razor's Edge and Honor Among Thieves and Scoundrels. They're pretty much just not really worth much, honestly. So yeah, you can just skip this one. Just read Cloak of Deception, Shadowhunter, and Darth Plagueis. You're more fine with that, to be honest. So yeah, do that with those instead. If you just care about the grand, not only the grand continuity, but just actually getting good stories that make sense and pretty much are excellent building blocks for the Darth Plagueis book. So, yeah, just do that, and yeah, that's all I gotta say. So, yeah, and this was Maul Lockdown, and we'll see you guys on the next State of Star Wars video. Bye bye.
Uh,
See ya.